Hello, Scrufftards. Welcome to the War Zone. I'm Scruffy, and this is Scruffy Tales. And this is gonna be a bit of a different one. We're gonna take a look at how Trump is pushing Europe to war, and I'm not just talking about Ukraine. I'm talking about the potential risk of a greater war in Europe. And I mean, we've all seen the complete madness that Donald Trump has shared online, where he's claiming Zelensky has tricked the United States into spending $350 billion. Complete bullshit. The Pentagon has vastly smaller figures in a war that couldn't be won, that never had to start, but a war that he, without the US and Trump, will never be able to settle. Okay. And I mean, he just goes on to spread various lies that the money is missing and stuff like that. It's just, and why is this? Why is this? Why is he? Why is Donald Trump calling Zelensky a dictator? Why is he lying about Zelensky's approval ratings? Why is he making up all these lies about how much money the United States have spent on it? It is to trick his followers into joining him in this crusade against Ukraine. And the reason is that Ukraine told, Donald Trump and his cronies to F off, basically. I mean, because Trump and, his henchmen, they wanted 50% ownership of Ukraine's rare earth minerals and other natural resources. That was the price. I mean, this is blackmail. Ukraine is invaded by Russia, and Trump comes along. Yeah, you want our continued support. We want 50% of your natural resources. It's insanity. It's insanity. And of course, Zelensky and the Ukrainians, they refused to sign this ridiculous deal. And the White House officials, they called it short-sighted. Uh, so what is the response then, other than calling Zelensky a dictator and clearly siding with Russia? Well, let's see what the U.S. response to all of this is. Well, apart from threatening to not supply Ukraine with arms and ammunition, we also have the threat to shut down Starlink. And as we can see, U.S. negotiators told Ukraine U.S. could shut off Starlink if mineral deal was not reached, right? And this is very crucial. Ukraine relies on Starlink for communications, secure communications that cannot be broken down or hacked and what have you, both militarily and civilian. The civilian government and the military relies on Starlink for secure communications. So you can imagine what happens if you break this down. If you take this away from the Ukrainians, then they can't coordinate on the front line. They cannot communicate internally in the government. They can't keep the government working efficiently, properly. This is a massive threat. And we should take it seriously because, as we remember, in September of 2023, Elon Musk, who is the owner of Starlink, shut it down. And which prevented Ukraine from launching a pretty big drone strike against Crimea at the time. So it's happened before. The Ukrainians have had Starlink shut down on them, which disrupted a big operation and disrupted the communications in general along the front line. And here we are, the United States is now threatening to do this again, but on a much grander scale, and if essentially shutting down Ukraine's ability to effectively wage this war and effectively defend themselves from Russian aggression, from Russian assaults. And this will, of course, give Russia a massive advantage on the battlefield. And of course, we also have Mika Aaltola from Finland, who it's not been confirmed by anyone as far as I know, but he was the source for this, a EU parliamentarian, as I understand it. The United States has given us, the EU in other words, 3 weeks to agree on the terms of Ukraine's surrender. If we don't, the United States will withdraw from Europe. In other words, according to Mika Altala, the United States is pressuring the EU to force Ukraine to accept a peace deal where Russia gains 20% of Ukraine and where the United States gets 50% of the natural resources of Ukraine. True or not, who knows? But I mean, I wouldn't put it past Trump. It does sound like Trump, doesn't it? And we also know that the United States, they have already floated the idea before all of this to reduce the US presence in Europe, to withdraw roughly 20,000 troops from Europe, and roughly 20%. And also demand greater financial contributions from NATO allies to cover the cost of maintaining the remaining forces. So Europe needs to pay the US for a military presence, and this probably will not happen, so more US forces will be withdrawn from Europe and what have you. So all in all, we can see a clear indication that the United States, they are leaning towards leaving Europe militarily. And on top of that, they are also threatening to give Russia a massive advantage on the front lines in Ukraine by reducing American military aid to Ukraine and by removing critical communications for the Ukrainian army. So what does that all add up to? It adds up to a situation where we might have Russia having an actual breakthrough at the front line, actually forcing Ukraine to fall back quite extensively if the Russians manage a proper breakthrough of the front lines. And then we are in dangerous territory indeed, because now we have, remember, France, was it back in 2023, when France said that, you know, we may deploy troops if Russia has a massive breakthrough. If the Russians were to break through the front lines, if there were a Ukrainian request, which is not the case today, we would legitimately have to ask ourselves this question, Macron said, regarding the possibility of sending ground troops to Ukraine. And they also went on to say, if Russia wins in Ukraine, there will be no security in Europe. Who can pretend that Russia will stop there? Right? And referring to the security of Moldova, Romania, Poland, Lithuania, and others. Right? So, what happens if the United States removes Starlink? What happens if the United States reduces military aid? What happens if the United States pulls back from European countries militarily? Chances are that France might actually get involved in Ukraine. And will the United Kingdom just look on and let that happen without them supporting France? Poland? The Germans are currently, they had a change of government. So yeah, we might actually, add the Germans into it. Will the Germans let France do it on their own? Will the Nordics let France do it on their own? You see, United States and Trump is, with these decisions, with these demands, he's either Ukraine surrenders unconditionally to Russia and the United States, or we increase the chances of a greater, wider war in Europe. And I mean, what happens if the Western nations here of Europe gets involved in Ukraine? Russia will mobilize fully. They will spin it as, it's a new fascist invasion, and, they all have to fight for the motherland and what have you. And chances are the border regions here with Russia will become, massacred, slaughtered, all-out warfare. It's going to be potentially I mean, countries will be reduced to rubble, multiple countries. And Russia will launch attacks and conduct sabotage against factories and the infrastructure all over Europe. And it will be chaos. The economy will go down the drain and what have you. People will be unemployed. People will die. It's going to be horrific. And meanwhile, the United States will more than likely sell us weapons at immense cost, at high price, because they're going to benefit from this. And when it's all over, if we have a Europe left, who's going to help us rebuild? The United States. The United States put Great Britain in debt after World War II. And the UK finally paid it back in 2006. And we're talking millions and billions of dollars. They're going to do the same. They're not going to rebuild without a price. They're going to come for natural resources of Ukraine, the North Sea, and the Ruhr area in Germany. Hell, the north of Sweden, where you have lots of minerals and iron and what have you. United States is going to demand all of that to pay for rebuilding Europe after the war with Russia is over. And currently, the United States is pushing Europe towards this option. If they pull out of Ukraine, if they abandon Ukraine and allow Russia to have that breakthrough, there is a risk that France and other great powers in the EU will get involved militarily. And then Russia will begin to attack all of Europe. And who knows what happens next. What we do know is that the United States will not get involved. Trump will never get involved in this war if it happens. He's going to come in when it's over and make a lot of heinous demands to rebuild and then be able to move in and claim control over a lot of the wealth and resources available in Europe. So that's what I fear might happen. I mean, there are no guarantees, of course, but I mean, if Ukraine decides to not bow down to US demands and they want to keep fighting, Europe will, of course, keep supporting Ukraine. But will that be enough to hold the line? Or will Russia have a major breakthrough and potentially move up and reach the Dnieper River eventually? What happens then if France gets involved? The UK, maybe Poland. What happens then? What does Europe do? Does the rest of Europe just look on and do nothing? Russia won't accept it. If you have Western European powers fighting in Ukraine, Russia will respond. Russia will retaliate. There will be missile strikes, drone strikes, sabotage. Civilians will be killed at important factory locations. Politicians will be assassinated. Bombs will go off at important infrastructure. So, or do we as Europeans avoid that by forcing Ukraine to surrender? Remember, United States is threatening to leave Europe. And if France gets involved, if Poland gets involved, Trump will pull all troops out of Europe. Guaranteed. I can guarantee you. If Poland, Germany, France, the UK, if they get involved in Ukraine, the United States will remove all troops from Europe in a heartbeat. And remember, Article 5 will not be in effect because these countries will be joining in on the war without being attacked. Article 5 only applies if you're attacked. This would be Europe moving in, siding with Ukraine to attack Russia. These are dangerous times, and hopefully sanity will prevail. But there's a really, really dark storm forming on the horizon, and I'm not sure we can avoid it. Because it's growing dark and it's growing big really fast. Especially now with Trump trying to turn the United States into a full-blown dictatorship. Hopefully, everything will be fine, right? Hopefully, the war will be contained to Ukraine. Hopefully, we will have peace, and the war will be over, and we can begin to rebuild, right? And the war will not spread beyond Ukraine. But I mean, at what cost? That Ukraine loses 20% of its territory to Russia, thereby justifying imperialistic powers to invade other countries, empowering them to do so. And also, will Ukraine lose 50% of their resources to the United States? Blackmail, theft, a superpower, bullying a smaller country, a country in need, and saying, sure, we can help you, but only if we get to own all of your wealth. Is that the price of freedom? Or is that the price of peace and freedom? Do we have peace in that case? Because who knows when the United States or Russia will start this all over again, over Greenland, Panama, Gaza, right? Canada, for fuck's sake. It's really dangerous times. Hopefully, sanity will prevail in the end.